You can get this and every other episode of the Rocking Horror Picture Show on Patreon, uncensored. The link is in the description below. Last year, I did a video covering the theatrical cut of The Butterfly Effect. I've always loved this movie because of its dark tone and reckless abandon when exploring the subject of trauma. My thesis was simple. This movie is way more f***ed up than most people remember. We're talking about a movie that is somehow able to cover topics like kitty dungeons and the death of babies and dogs alike within the first 20 minutes of runtime. The rest of the movie doesn't get any more forgiving. It jumps into other heavy subjects as well, such as the politics of prison Nazi jobs. It's a really dark, mean-spirited movie that covers the subject of childhood trauma with the grace of a stumbling alcoholic playing Twister. So, seeing as it's one of the most shamelessly dark films ever made, I've always loved it, and I had to cover it because I hate myself, and am, for whatever reason, determined to destroy my sanity by the end of this little project I call my YouTube channel. You can see that video in the card or the description. It was generally well received by the web, but the most frequent comments I got on this video, the top inquiry from viewers, was this: why the fuck did you not cover the ending in the director's cut? The one that features Evan going back in time to his mother's womb? That was the most fucked up part of all, and you didn't even cover it, you son of a... So, first off, let me say, you're right. I didn't do my homework when it came to the director's cut. I'll be honest, I had only watched this movie in theaters, twice admittedly, and eventually streamed it from the comfort of my living room. Neither of these versions contained the aforementioned scenes that people kept mentioning. So, I bought a DVD, sat down on my couch, and threw on the director's cut. And let me tell you, you guys were right. Without a doubt, the director's cut is the most fucked up mainstream release that I may ever watch in this lifetime. It changes literally everything about the context of this movie and turns it into something so goddamn depressing that by the time the credits roll, you may be looking for a spare umbilical cord of your very own to hang yourself alongside with Evan. The main thing that's different between the two versions of the film is what role Evan plays in removing himself from Kaylee's life. In the theater version, he sacrifices love to save everybody else. And that's noble. It makes him the hero. And not only that, one who can live his own life as well. And though it's sad to watch his childhood love disappear from his life, at least everybody's fine because he did the right thing. He solved the problem. In the director's cut, however, it's far bleaker. He can't solve the problem. He is the problem. And the only way to save everybody around him is to take himself out of the equation before he's even born. Evan Treeborn? Event Reborn? The director's cut adds several key scenes that recontextualize everything. An extra scene with his father, for example, where we learn about the family's superpowers, as well as a few scenes with Evan's mom, where she reveals a much darker truth about his birth. And finally, it recontextualizes the palm reader scene, because in the theater version, that based on his lifeline, his life doesn't exist, which only makes sense in the director's cut ending. Little whoopsies like this always happen when studios force visionaries to compromise the vision in the name of mainstream appeal. The most important change to the director's cut, however, is this. They add a scene where Evan's mother confesses to having several miscarriages and stillbirths before he was born, which makes me wonder why she was so optimistic to have children up to that point anyways, but I digress. This most likely means that several of Evan's predecessors had the same power of time travel that he did, and they all reached the same grim conclusion with a selfless act of fetus deletus. In fact, it gets deeper. In this version, it suggests that several members of his family all had this power. His father in the asylum, his grandfather, and now, several generations later, all the other self-deleted tree-born children as well, because they've all realized one brutal truth. A conclusion that is much darker than the theater version. They all realize that it doesn't matter what choices they make, what mistakes they can correct. Generally, the thesis of the theater version. The director's cut version has a far darker message. The only possible way to prevent themselves from hurting the ones that they love is to never exist in the first place. That is possibly the darkest ending I could possibly dream up. And trust me, my dreams are made up exclusively of nightmares. I remember the uproar about 13 Reasons Why, where people complained that the show was encouraging impressionable teens to commit unalive in the name of poetic justice. And some of those concerns were valid. So by that logic, I can see why the studio did not allow this cut to get out. The point that this version of the movie seems to reach is basically, sometimes it's better to unalive yourself because all you'll do is hurt people. That is a bleak fucking message to sell the youth of America. And yet, that's exactly what they did with this diabolical little DVD full of nihilistic prescriptions for how to handle the future. It was a dirty bomb of adolescent misery, and they set out into the wild with the blind enthusiasm of a little girl stuck in a well. And the damage that it did to a generation's mental health is a wound that will haunt them for years to come. And that is why I'm such a huge fan of this version. If I had known the director's cut was this much more bleak and mean-spirited, I would have loved this film even more from day one. It truly breaks my heart that this version never got to break mine as a teen. In fact, this version of the film I see much more analogous to another bleak early 2000s classic, Donnie Darko, as pointed out by this commenter right here. That's a movie in which the protagonist comes to the same grim conclusion. Donnie realizes at the end of the movie that the only way to save Gretchen is to stay put when the jet engine smashes through his roof, thus smushing him like a bug, but saving her life by prematurely ending his. And that's basically what Evan does for Kaylee in this version. And it earns that ending just as well as Donnie Darko did, because you see the cost of sustaining his presence in her life. She dies in some futures and becomes a drug-addicted, wounded hooker in others. So, to all my friends and neighbors, do yourself a favor and buy a copy of the director's cut DVD. I have no stake in this. New Line Cinema did not give me a cut, but if you want to, my email's in the description. I'm simply recommending this version of the film because it completely transformed my entire opinion on the movie. I mean, look at me. I'm now calling our ill-fated protagonist by his God-given fictional name. No longer content to simply call him Ashton. Now, he's Evan to me, and after watching him wrap an umbilical cord around his neck while still floating around in the womb to save the people he loves, he'll always be Evan Treeborn to me. Anyways, that's this week's Rock and Roll Sideshow. Check out my full Butterfly Effect review if you haven't already, and let me know what your thoughts are on the Butterfly Effect's director's cut in the comments below. Did you love it more than the original? Preferred the theatrical cut because the DVD destroyed your sanity? I'd love to hear about your mileage with both versions. Until next week, I'm your host, Sleeve T. And as always, I'm doing just fine.